I'm Warren Sprouse. This is the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 until 10 p.m. Eastern, and we are doing it all for you, looking at life through a biblical lens. Do you know anything about history? I want to give you a moral history lesson. This is not totally original with me. I got this from somebody, and I cannot remember. I would give attribution, I would, but I can't remember where I got the article that was the seed for this. But the author says the modernism of the late 19th and 20th centuries brought us Darwinism, Marxism, Freudianism, and neo-evangelicalism. By the mid-1920s, we were celebrating the Roaring Twenties with speakeasies, flappers, and boogie-woogie. Billy Sunday and the temperance movements had resulted in a new amendment to the Constitution that outlawed the sale of alcohol. Women, children, families, and entire society were now safe from the ravages of that alcohol brought, or so we thought. The banning of alcohol brought us to near anarchy. Lawlessness was celebrated, especially as it applied to nightclubs and the sale of these now forbidden substances. Organized crime syndicates rose up to dominate the culture in movies and in real life. Murderers were known and celebrated. Bank robbers, bootleggers, folk heroes. In 1933, however, we did something we'd never done before and we've never done since. We repealed a constitutional amendment. A 13-year experience in human nature to learn what every Sunday school child knew. The heart of man is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. That means beyond anything we can imagine. Jeremiah 17:9. It cannot be constrained by external argument nor by force of law. Remove the constraints, whatever they may be, and ordinary citizens who would never have thought to do an immoral thing will rise up in their newfound freedoms to express that heart in private and in public ways. Why are so many rational human beings getting tattooed? We now have word that there are new tattoos that are coming out that don't include the burning of flesh, and they therefore will not discolor and get old looking and yucky. And I guess you can get them off easier. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know anything about it. But the Great Depression brought a government with a pseudo-socialist mindset that is trying to take care of everybody. Experts tell us these efforts simply prolonged the Depression. Something that should have lasted about 3 years went on for 10 or 12. Our Social Security system and the cards we carry around are living proof, making it easy to usher in the Great Society with its welfare cards and now with universal health care, none of which have done what the architects either promised or thought. In the 1930s, while Congress was struggling with the Social Security program, one of the holdups was the numbering system. The Rockefeller administration promised the American people that this number would never be used to identify people. How long did that last? The country took a deep breath, dared to hope that all would be well, and then Germany invaded Poland. It was 1939, and the next 7 years would tear the world apart. God suddenly became very real to those facing the guns and those facing the fears, financial strains, and rationing at home. The same God enshrined in our founding documents, the one who got us through the Revolution and the war between the states. We did not necessarily follow his principles, but we did fear his displeasure, and, well, we needed his protection. During this time, we had what were called blue laws, a term to describe the religious limitations on what could be sold on Sunday, which some called the Christian Sabbath. The next 20 years would see tremendous changes. By 1965, we were headed toward Vietnam. Divorce was becoming more public and acceptable. Elizabeth Taylor had already been married and divorced several times. Birth control pills allowed employers to hire women without fear of losing her without notice. Families were starting to fragment as a result. Television had taken hold, in color no less. We had gone about as far as a society could go. In reality, we were only just beginning. Biblical patterns of family life, morality, ethics were going the way of the dodo bird. Those patterns would remain for another few decades, but the heart of it was gone. The baby boomers had money. They had cars, transistor radios, movies in Technicolor, on television. Monday night at the movies would soon become Friday, then Saturday, then Thursday, and pretty much now movies are a staple. And we had recreational drugs. The drugs were not mainstreamed until after Vietnam soldiers bringing their habits home and an entire underground industry rising up to supply it. In the midst of it, we lost an entire generation. Baby boomers were largely children of ease, but their children, the busters, were worse. Not having parents at home to guide their development, busters are also called Generation X because they have no purpose. They came of age in the 1990s. They gave birth to the millennials. Millennials are not connected to anything that a boomer knows or cares about. With no formative link with the past, no patterns to ground them, no values to support them, no reason to sacrifice anything they wanted or liked to do, they created an entirely different society. They came of age on the wings of fear. The new millennium brought new fears. We were told that the computer systems we'd had for the last 20 years would not recognize the new millennial date, and therefore everything would stop at midnight. It didn't. But then the World Trade Centers came down. The bubble they lived in was burst. The world was a dangerous place, not simply a playground, and these people did not know how to handle it. They looked to their government to keep everything under control so they could continue to play. Then Islam began their march to conquer the world for Allah. At first they lived in denial, buoyed by those who were disengaged from reality themselves, the boomers, the 60-somethings at that time, and the busters, the 40-somethings. In time it became obvious that the world was coming unglued. The West's effort to save Kuwait had awakened a sleeping giant. The Sunni Muslims who believe in a Mahdi who was born in the 1300s and is now awaiting the right time to return, began to work in order to make that reality. Meaning, they began to look for ways to take over the world for Islam. The Quran tells Muslims to live at peace with their neighbors until they have sufficient majority. But should they be attacked by infidels, they are to strike back and to keep striking until they prevail. The West attacked two Sunni nations, Iraq and Afghanistan, and the game was on. It gives every indication of having enough life to continue until the world is embroiled in a global struggle. And should that happen, it will take us to the very brink of the Great Tribulation. Today, America hates God, the God of the Bible. The vast majority of Americans are not Christians. They may go to church, but they're not saved. The vast majority of Americans are selfish. The vast majority of Americans want to be taken care of by the government. The vast majority likes the Democrat socialist agenda. Can you feel the burn? This is not encouraging as we look forward. The combination of a national and global war, along with the people who depend upon their government, is a recipe for disaster. So buy gold. Hoard it. Make sure you have plenty of emergency food and water and storage. That's not bad advice anymore. But what would be better would be to pray and to be the person God wants you to be. To pray and be prepared. To pray and spread the gospel as long as you can. In my opinion, I don't think the church is going to be around much longer. Of course, every generation has said that for the last 2,000 years. The first century believers were seriously stressed when Christians started dying and Jesus hadn't yet returned, as he said that he would. But the word today is don't panic, don't fear. God has all this under control. If things get really crazy, you want to be known as one who has hope, not one who is in the storm cellar cowering in the corner just like everybody else. The Christian has no reason to fear except fear itself.